Hello and welcome. You've tuned into In Your Interest here on News 9 Live. I'm Krishnakumar, and the big story on the show is, will GST rates in India go up to 35%? Now, in the latest, the group of ministers, we have gotten together to raise interest rates, GST rates, but to 35%. The council meeting scheduled to happen this month on the 21st of December. However, prior to that meeting, the group of ministers is playing a pivotal role in shaping policy recommendations. It has made many suggestions. It has proposed a staggering 35% GST rate that can be applied to items that include cigarettes, tobacco and related products, pan masala, and even aerated beverages. If accepted by the GST Council, the 35% rate will be a new addition to the existing four-tier tax slab structure. Currently, tobacco products already face a hefty tax burden of 28%, bear in mind, coupled with an additional cess. Not just that, the group of ministers also recommends a major rejig in the textile sector. It is likely to propose a tax rate tweaks on 148 items to the GST Council, including packaged water, leather bags, luxury watches, shoes, bicycles, ready-made garments, and more. Let's understand, what does it mean for India to have its goods and services tax at 35%. We have Mr. Ritesh Kanodia, partner, Aurtus Consulting, Indirect Tax Advisory and Litigation, now joining us. Ritesh, thank you so much for taking time out to be with us here on In Your Interest. You know, we are talking about GST rates at 35% at a time when the GDP rate has come at less than 5.5%.
So, GST at 35% is not going to be a general phenomenon. I think we need to understand the basics of why this is being proposed, the thought process, sorry, not the basics. So if you would know that there was a compensation cess which was existing at some point in time, and the compensation cess ends on 2026, March 2026. So the government has been sort of thinking on, with respect to certain goods, which they call it as sin goods, and cigarettes come within that category. How do they levy that additional GST that they've been collecting? So if you talk about cigarettes, for example, the compensation cess ranges from 5 to 36%. So the base rate is 28%. And then there is a cess which ranges for 5 to 36%. Like for on tobacco, the cess goes up to 160%. And if, let's say, the compensation cess regime ends, then how do they sort of incorporate this and collect this from the end user? And I think the thought process, and if you remember in the 54th GST Council meeting that constituted this GoM to deliberate on how do we integrate compensation cess into the normal GST rate. At the same time, there was this discussion around certain essential commodities, like, for example, packaged water, which I think today is at 28%, and packaged water is not a sin commodity. So how do they bring it down to a lower rate? So this entire rejig is happening from that perspective, so that the government does not lose revenue. Let's say tomorrow there is a decision which is taken that compensation cess cannot be levied. Let me also tell you one more aspect. There is still a discussion going on whether the compensation cess can be extended, and that has been referred, I think, internally to their law committee, etc., which decision has not yet been taken. So the decision of 35, it's not that yes, a new slab will mostly be added, which is not there till date. But in my view, the slab should be restricted to purely sin commodities and should not be levied as a general rate of tax. That's the understanding as of today.
Right, even by sin tax standards, 35% is a big number. That's the reason why you're seeing the social media chatter around it. And you're talking about very basic goods that people consume a lot, like aerated beverages, like apparel. Apparel in excess of 10,000 rupees, attracts 35% GST, and less than 10,000 rupees, but above 1,500 rupees, still attracts about 28% GST. The rates are already high on some of these most consumed products.
I think the discussion and the debate is what is sin, right? So is all luxury a sin? So today, for example, if I'm wearing a shirt which is above a particular price, or buying a watch, right? Will you call that as a sin? And yes, that's where a disconnect is, because the idea of GST was to sort of make it simplified. And now what is happening is there is one more new slab which is coming in. And what we have, earlier the philosophy was, when 28% was introduced, the thought was remove as many possible products from 28 as possible. And we saw a trend where 28 was being reduced, right? Earlier, a lot of even 84, chapter 84, which is machinery, etc., were under 28%, which gradually moved to 18%. We have now suddenly seeing a reverse trend where a lot of products are now moving not to 28 but to 35. Yes, that's not really something which should have been done. The government should have thought through on some other mechanism of revenue enhancement instead of compensation says. Adding a new slab, without commenting into what is sin, whether cigarette is sin, whether watches is sin, whether clothes are sin, it complicates the entire GST structure. So the idea was to sort of have, in fact, the thought was to rationalize merged slab rates. So there was this discussion around merging 12 and 18, but it doesn't seem that's happening. So yes, it's a debatable question. What do you call it as sin? Is every luxury a sin? Is the question.
Yeah, the debate around what is a sin, if are aerated drinks sin, or in that sense, cigarettes and aerated drinks are both, harmful to public health, so it is more punitive taxation.
Okay, my thought is.
And by the way, the fact that we are putting aerated beverages and cigarettes is very new.
Aerated beverages were always under 28%. Now, yes, the enhanced rate of tax would really impact the industry in a large way. As I said, it's an individual discussion on what you call as sin. I would not want to comment on that. I don't drink cigarettes, so I'm not an impacted consumer. But I didn't drink aerated beverages. I'm an impacted consumer. But without getting into sin and non-sin, the question is it the right time to tinker with the slab rates, bring a rate of tax which is as high as 35%, and we already have 4 slab rates. So you're just further complicating the GST structure. Was there a better way to sort of handle this? And I agree to your point to say is aerated beverages a sin, though. Yeah, somebody may say it has a health impact, etc. But then aerated beverages may have multiple facets, right? You may have something which might have a health impact. You may have something which is actually a health drink, but still falls within the category of aerated beverages. So those are, I think, questions which will get debated. And this is not a final decision. This is just a news item. So I think we just need to see how it evolves.
We need to see how it evolves, but this entire slabs have always been revised and redone time and again. I'd like your thoughts on how we are going about it in terms of GST. It has been through so many ups and downs in its own way, and yet continues to soldier on. And with these kind of inordinate hikes, doesn't it come across as something that's as too much of an imposition on the public?
No, you're absolutely right, because see, every change has a lot of consequences. So let's say, for example, today they change the rate to 35%. So there is a stock which is already lying in the market. That is number one. Number two is there is an entire IT system rejig that they will have to do. They'll have to change. Today, for example, the way my invoicing would have been structured is that there is a tax rate and there is a compensation cess. Now I will have to merge, I'll have to maybe create new slab rates, etc. So it really takes a lot of effort to sort of implement all of this. And therefore, that is where I was saying that a new slab was not advisable. It creates challenges for the industry. You first have a thought process of bringing products out of 28. Now you are moving to 35. So yes, what you're saying is right, that they should have really not introduced a new slab rate and maybe some other mechanism to see. The entire philosophy of compensation was to, compensate states who would have lost revenue, right? And there are states which are actually doing good under GST. There are states which are losing revenue, but that was always the consequence of GST. And when initially it was decided that the compensation would be for 5 years, which again got extended by some 4 years to 2026. I think somewhere there had to be a stoppage, but it seems that's not happening. Even though GST is really giving robust revenues, we still see tax rates and tax rates getting increased. Though there is also a reduction on essential products and commodity. I'm not saying it is one-way traffic. Yeah, but it complicates things.
Especially, when you have, insurance, health and term insurance premiums, getting 18%, there is no resolution for on that end as well.
Yeah, so I think there would be some notification in the next GST, after the next GST Council meeting, where below 5 lakhs and senior citizens probably, and I'm not saying necessarily, probably are going to be exempted. But what they believe is that whoever takes an health insurance above 5 lakh is again liable to be taxed at 18%. Let me tell you, the consideration is, of course, the revenue loss. Nobody is ready to forego that revenue which is coming out of insurance. And to be honest, 5 lakh amount on an insurance is nothing, right? Today, in today's world, 5 lakh is a very small component. So yes, maybe the focus is to say that let the lower class, the lower middle class who only takes an insurance of 5 lakh, or let's say there is a cap, value cap, is subject to a lower rate, but otherwise everything sort of goes under an 18% rate. Term insurance, at least, they should have considered it because it's basically life. Even income tax doesn't tax proceeds out of term insurance. But we'll see some exemption in the next GST Council meeting on senior citizens, and I think a value below 5 lakhs.
Right, and I'm asking this question, having this conversation to you on behalf of the Indian middle class, which is continuously already been talking about the tax burden. They pay nearly 40% in income tax, and on top of that come all these indirect taxes, on the different products that they use, and invariably, all the Indian middle class uses, be it a salon or be it an SUV, all of that, are the ones which are in the highest tax brackets somehow.
Yeah, see if you see the trend, right? Now they've started bifurcating products into luxury and non-luxury. So watches, for example, they believe aerated beverages also consumed by higher class. That is the trend which is evolving. But somewhere I agree to you that it is also impacting the middle class. So for example, car is today attracting a big amount, 43% compensation at the lowest model, and the rate is quite high. Right now,
The SUV can be a mid-size
correct.
SUV, can be a compact SUV. So, a smallest SUV, a 10 lakhs or under, also will end up attracting nearly 50% in GST plus cess.
53% to be
Yes.
exact. Yes. And see, you would also probably see a rate reject there if tomorrow compensation assess is getting withdrawn. Because the question is, can the government bring down the 53% to 28%? Seems very unlikely. So there are revenue considerations, which is playing out sort of, and the revenue has to come from somewhere. So it seems the approach the government has adopted is that let's tax the rich guys whom they believe would be the consumer of such products like expensive watch. So if you see again, bringing monetary limits, right, above a particular value, above etc., further complicates this entire structure. We had gone through this in the past. Now, let's say watch is about 25,000. I can see that on your screen. Now, let's say if I sell a watch for 24,500, and those kind of litigations will now start coming in. Why do we want to complicate it so much? Now, the different structures for a watch which is below a particular amount, above a particular amount. I don't think so. That was a desirable GST. We wanted to make it simple, a simple slab rate, etc. But now it seems we have seen too many diversions in terms of slab rates, in terms of value limits. That's where the challenge is.
Okay, if Ritesh, at this stage, if I were to ask you at this next GST Council meeting, which is set for the 21st of December, what do you think should be the top priorities / priorities, for the GST Council at this stage?
See, according to me, the next meeting would be more focused on the budget-related changes. Let's say if there are any nuances which are to be addressed, I think that could be one point of discussion. The other thing which I see is insurance would, of course, find a mention in the next GST Council meeting. And the rate rationalization, I don't think so. There will be a conclusion in the next meeting because the report is yet to be received. The earlier due date was 31st 12 2023. I don't think so. That has still been finalized. And on certain aspects, like for example, whether they can continue compensation sales as per the newspaper reports, a legal view is still pending of whether legally they can extend, etc. So I think the next meeting would be sort of a presentation to present the new GM would present in terms of what is their thought process, multiple options, alternatives, and then I think the final decision probably could be near to the budget date or maybe along with the budget. So I'm not very sure whether they've agreed to certain rate changes on certain products. Maybe see, cigarette is the most easiest thing to target, right? Because I don't think so. There is a doubt in the mind of the government that it is a sin product. So they were just go ahead with, making it 35%. They will have to clearly bring this in the budget, because my understanding is they can't simply introduce a 35% slab without, bringing it in the budget. So that's where, while they may pass a recommendation, and meeting purpose is because the budget is going to be coming nearer. So that's what I broadly see is going to happen.
All right, we will leave it at that. Ritesh Kanodia, partner, Aurtus Consulting, Indirect Tax Advisory and Litigation. Thank you so much for taking time out to be with us here on In Your Interest.